Hey y'all, welcome back for another episode of Flick Connection, where I'm going to tell you about all the best stuff Netflix is adding in June 2024.
So what happened?
In this month, we've got the highly anticipated Richard Linklater's Hitman. We've also got some Sharks Underneath Paris. And Jessica Alba is returning to action movies for the first time in practically 10 years. This episode is sponsored by Beam, but first, let's talk about all the big movies that they're adding on June 1st. Starting with the World War I epic 1917. This is from visionary director Sam Mendes and was created as if it was one continuous shot. Now, you can tell when they're changing for different scenes in this movie. It's not a miracle of filmmaking, but it does ground you to these two main characters incredibly well, and the movie feels very realistic and intense as a result. I mean, we're going to a world we've been in cinematically countless times, but Sam Mendes did kind of an amazing job telling this story as one continuous thing. You get loads of just brilliant one-take shots in this movie, and it really is kind of a masterpiece of filmmaking. Easily one of my top picks for the entire month. They're also adding the Conjuring trilogy. That's going to be the original Conjuring, The Conjuring 2, and The Devil Made Me Do It. You know, the third one that was weird and not very good at all. Those first two still pretty horrifying. They're also adding Michael Mann's Ali, one that I'm interested to watch, but I think I gotta get around to his most recent movie, Ferrari, first. And then Simon, or Simon, is about a man who escaped everything going on in Venezuela to live in Miami and kind of has to decide whether he's going to go back and help people or not. If you don't know what's been going on in Venezuela the last several years, this movie could be a good insight into it. It's got high ratings. I have not seen this one yet, but it's one I'll be checking out in early June. While Netflix did recently remove Dune, they are adding the 1984 version back, directed by David Lynch. A mess of a movie, even by his standards. I don't even believe David Lynch claims this movie is one of his anymore, but it's still kind of a wild 1980s ride that, again, yes, it's a mess, but if you enjoy Dune, there's still a lot to love with this original. Even some of the messiness is now enjoyable. But if you're looking for some more current sci-fi, they're adding the entire Divergent trilogy. This was not one I was super into. It's based on some young adult novels. My wife liked these quite a bit, and I will admit I enjoyed these movies much more than the Twilight movies, but they're kind of in a similar vein.
Here we go. 3, 2, 1.
Boxer, one down.
SWAT is a fun one, but it does feel pretty dated. It's over 20 years old now and feels like something from the early 2000s, down to the soundtrack and the whole vibe of it, which today feels pretty corny, but is also kind of fun. They're also adding the now Tyrese classic Baby Boy, a movie I realize I've never seen in full, like from beginning to end, so it's on my calendar for June.
Oh, hey, look, it's the ice. Why is it so big?
So it doesn't melt. It's actually really interesting how they do it. It's this one company out in Boston that...
And they're also adding A Million Ways to Die in the West, a movie I wish was much better than it actually ended up being. This was Seth MacFarlane's follow-up to the success of Ted, and while the movie does have a lot of funny jokes in it, it's also just, I don't know, it's kind of silly. It's not nearly as funny as Family Guy or Ted, but still has a handful of laughs in it. And because for most of you, the kids are home from school for the summer, I know it's an intense ride for a lot of us, but Netflix is aware and they're adding a bunch of family movies as a result, so I'll be quick with these. Detective Pikachu is one of my top picks. Ryan Reynolds actually voices Pikachu, and it's got a lot of Ryan Reynolds humor in it. It's also just an over-the-top action movie that's totally appropriate for young kids. Flushed Away also has a lot of action in it. The animation style is a little bit dated, but this is from the Aardman Animation Group, who do Wallace and Gromit, Chicken Run, and their sense of humor is pretty fantastic. This is a really funny watch with the kids. It also has a pretty killer English soundtrack. But they're also adding Home, which is a really fun animated movie, and the Lego Movie. If you've somehow never seen this one, it's kind of a bonkers ride and features a lot of advanced technology that just makes everything look like real Legos moving at action movie paces. I highly recommend it, and they're adding another Lego Movie later in the month, but we'll get to that in a minute. They're also adding the now Will Ferrell classic, Kicking and Screaming, one of the only real family-friendly movies he's ever done. My kids both play soccer, so this will be a fun one to introduce them to soon.
You step on this field, this is all about you. I mean, I'm not gonna be the one staying up late at night, you know, punching a hole through the window, or crying myself to sleep, or wetting my bed.
And then they're also adding Will Ferrell's Land of the Lost, which is family-friendly for older kids. It's PG-13 and has a lot of potty humor in it, but still pretty funny stuff, especially if you grew up watching the original Land of the Lost show. Not a masterpiece, but silly Will Ferrell stuff. Next up, we've got all the new stuff Netflix is adding throughout the month, as well as everything that they're removing throughout the month of June. But before that, I do want to tell you about how today's sponsor, Beam, has helped me get some solid sleep lately. Dream by Beam is a luxurious drink blend filled with the highest quality sleep-promoting ingredients. It's a delicious powder that you mix with just a little bit of warm milk about an hour, maybe 30 minutes before bed. I usually enjoy mine about halfway through my last movie of the day. Now personally, I never really have trouble falling asleep, but as I've gotten older, I find that I'll often wake up in the early hours of the morning, 4 or 5 a.m., and have trouble falling back to sleep, and I often don't feel rested as a result. But when I drink a glass of Dream before bed, I find that I'll still wake up sometimes naturally, sometimes yes because a 6-year-old had a nightmare, but whatever the reason, I find I'm able to fall right back to sleep comfortably, and I wake up feeling refreshed. Dream comes available in a CBD version and a non-CBD version. I have been taking the non-CBD version, and it tastes good. The standard one is like a cinnamon chocolate flavor, which is again kind of a nice luxurious drink before bed. This one's chocolate peanut butter. I haven't cracked the seal on it yet, but there's also a chocolate mint I've tried. If you like chocolate and mint, it is delicious. But what has surprised me most is the fact that it doesn't feel heavy and doesn't make me feel drowsy at all. It's just the amount of nudge I need to help me stay asleep and, you know, feel refreshed. Just one scoop of Beam Dream is clinically shown to help you fall asleep faster, stay asleep, and wake up feeling more refreshed. So click the link in the description below or use the QR code and use my code FLICK. You're gonna get up to 45% off your first order, which is the biggest discount they've ever offered. This stuff's also low calorie, keto friendly, vegan friendly, so it's really easy to incorporate into your routine. To get up to 45% off, use the link in the video description below or this QR code and use my code FLICK. It's a great deal, but speaking of great stuff, let's talk about everything else Netflix is adding in June.
And let it be shown that we chose to die on our feet rather than live on our knees.
Almost immediately on June 3rd, they're adding 300 Rise of an Empire. This is the sequel to 300 that wasn't nearly as popular. And the storytelling is pretty sloppy with this 300 movie, but the visual presentation is absolutely breathtaking, and you've also got Eva Green in the mix, who's always delightful to look at. How I Met Your Mother seasons 1 through 9 is getting added. This will likely be a hit for Netflix. It'll likely be in the top 10. With the exception of the new show Tires on Netflix, I'm pretty well over sitcoms at this point, especially ones that came out on TV years ago. But speaking of things that were on TV years ago, they're also adding a bunch of ESPN's 30 for 30 documentaries. If you like those, there's a handful getting added on the 3rd, and then a few more peppered throughout the month. Then on the 5th, they've got one I've been waiting for a couple of months now, and I'm very curious about it. It's called Under Paris, and it's about a man-eating shark, I believe a mutant shark, swimming in the channels underneath Paris. Now visually, this looks like an excellent Netflix movie. I mean, it looks like it's got a little pop, a little big budget flair, but I've often been disappointed by movies like this. It will certainly be one I'll be checking out early in the month, and it's really gonna come down to how self-aware it is. If it's able to have a little bit of fun with itself and be entertaining, fantastic. If it takes itself way too seriously, could be a snooze fest. Odds are I'll be letting you know about it on future episodes.
He's robbed 14 banks in Seattle since June of 1992. this case was spinning a little bit out of control.
He was a smart bank robber.
How to Rob a Bank looks like the true crime doc of the month. It's about one of the world's most prolific bank robbers. He actually operated out of the Pacific Northwest. And not only does it look like Hollywood level stuff, but this guy's nickname was actually Hollywood. It also looks like it features a lot of archival footage, including some home videos of this guy. And apparently the story goes into some surprisingly dark directions. Also on the 5th, David Letterman returns with his My Next Guest Needs No Introduction talk show. Then for some more comedy on June 6th, they're adding Crazy Rich Asians, which is technically like a romantic comedy, but the romance stuff is light in this one, even though it does revolve around a wedding. This movie was a surprise smash hit across the globe, and it was for good reasons. It's a genuinely funny movie that I think most people could get into. It's filled to the gills with fantastic actors and a handful of just some insanely funny comedy actors. There's some amazing characters in this movie, and that's what I loved the most about it, was literally how rich some of the characters were. Not in money, but just in the vibe and the flavor some of them brought to screen. I thought was just fantastic and is honestly highly rewatchable. Also on the 6th, Sweet Tooth returns for its final season. This show is actually produced by Robert Downey Jr., and even though he's not in it, it's actually based on a DC comic series. It's kind of a post-apocalyptic thing, a little bit, and has some cool elements. It's not a show I have kept up with, but I remember watching most of season 1, and it is a cinematic show for sure. Then on the 7th, they're adding Richard Linklater's highly anticipated Hitman.
Sounds lovely.
Now, in this movie, Glenn Powell actually plays a professor who masquerades as various hitmen, I believe, in order to capture people trying to hire hitmen. It's a real thing that happens, and apparently this is loosely based on a true story. But this too looks like it's got romantic comedy vibes, but because it's Richard Linklater, it, from the trailer, looks like it goes into some surprising directions that rom-coms do not go. Apparently this was co-written by Linklater and the star, Glenn Powell, who I first saw in a Richard Linklater movie titled Everybody Wants Some, which was kind of like a spiritual sequel to Dazed and Confused, also directed by Richard Linklater. I actually mentioned this movie recently in my email newsletter, which by the way is totally free. You could sign up right here. I send it out every single week. It's actually titled Flicks of the Week, and you get recommendations that I don't necessarily discuss here, but in Everybody Wants Some, I spotted Glenn Powell as a star, and he's gone on to become one. He's in some huge movies, including the new Twister movie, but he steals every scene he's in Everybody Wants Some, so I'm very excited to see these two guys working together again, especially Hitman looks like more of a collaboration. This too, one of my top picks of the month.
We'll see.
Oh Lord, please don't let me be misunderstood.
Wonder is a pretty heartwarming movie. It stars Julia Roberts and Owen Wilson. They have a young, disfigured boy, actually played by Jacob Tremblay. This is one of his first movies after his performance in Room. But like I said, it's more heartwarming than Room was. And then Mysteries of the Terracotta Warriors. This is something I've been interested in for a while, and I only have cursory knowledge of this tomb filled with all these terracotta soldiers, meaning I know a few details and some of the mysteries around it, and it's a very mysterious archaeological find that's only about 50 years old, meaning they discovered it, you know, in the 70s. And while this does look like it's got a good presentation, I'm mostly just interested to learn more about the mysteries around these terracotta soldiers. On the 13th, Bridgerton Season 3 returns for Part 2. On last month's video, I mentioned that the show might be winding down because they're splitting them into parts, which is typically the case with Netflix, but there is a Season 4 coming, probably in less than 12 months. And while that show is not really for me, I will be tuning in on the 13th to the new Gene Wilder documentary. Now, I don't believe this is a Netflix original, but it was released in 2024. And Gene Wilder is someone I've become more and more interested in as I've gotten older. Obviously, I always loved him as Willy Wonka, but I discovered how clever a lot of his performances have been over the years. So I'm very interested to watch this documentary in particular. And then every single month, I point out that there's like one big family movie, or at least an animated movie that's going to be great for kids. And this month, the biggest one that they're releasing seems like it's going to be Ultraman Rising. This one's about a superhero that can grow to enormous sizes, and he fights kaijus and then has to raise one that kind of looks like a dragon. Should be one of those movies that's fun for the kids and fun enough for you to watch. And then Agents of Mystery is a new game show from South Korea that looks pretty fun. It looks kind of like an escape room type of a setup. I was a big fan of Physical 100, just kind of an amazingly orchestrated game show from South Korea. And so I'm interested to see what's going on here. One, because I've liked escape rooms in the past, but also I'm telling you that Physical 100 show is so well put together and the games are so well designed. I'm kind of hoping for some similar stimulation with Agents of Mystery. On the same day, they're adding 50 Shades of Grey, a movie I imagine most people that would want to see it have seen enough, but Netflix also has a bunch of strange sex movies right now, and I've honestly been watching them in preparation of maybe doing a video on them. If you're interested, let me know in the comments. I've still got a couple to watch before making my final decision, but I've seen some weird ones lately. On the 19th, they're adding the entire series of Dexter, seasons 1 through 9. Which means they have the rebooted season, which I did not watch, but I loved the original series. Now, it does have some years on it, but it's thoroughly entertaining, really well written. This was one the wife and I thoroughly enjoyed back when it was originally airing. I highly recommend it, especially if you like serial killer stuff. The show's pretty entertaining. I felt like season 8 ended with the proper amount of closure, so I never really had an interest to watch that 9th season that they produced years after the original finale, but who knows, maybe I'll give it a shot this month. And then also on the 19th, they're adding the Lego Batman movie, which is just as wild and bombastic as the Lego movie, except you get Will Arnett voicing Batman, and it's absolutely hilarious. Not just because he's funny, but they play Batman in a way where he's just very, very full of himself, and it actually plays out really well. The movie's got some nice lessons for kids, but is also just this dazzling, beautiful Batman movie to watch as a nerd adult like myself.
Oh my goodness. I am so sorry. As soon as I get back to the Batcave, I will make sure that Alfred puts seatbelts on there. But for the time being, I'm just gonna put my arm right here.
On the 20th, they're adding America's Sweethearts, the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders. I can't remember the last time I heard anyone talk about NFL cheerleaders. To me, this seems like kind of a ploy for the NFL just to try to get people interested again. You know, people that have cut the cord who are just watching Netflix and other streaming services, just trying to give them a reason to get back into watching the NFL. I doubt it's gonna work. And then The Accidental Twins is a documentary about two sets of twins that were swapped at birth. I'm always fascinated to hear about these stories. I loved the documentary 3 Identical Strangers. I don't expect this one to be nearly as mind-blowing, but still, it's a topic I'm interested in. And then on the 21st, like I said, Jessica Alba returns to action movies for the first time in practically 10 years. I say practically because she was technically in The Mechanic 2 with Jason Statham, which is one of the dumbest action movies I've ever seen, which is a huge statement coming from me because I watch a lot of dumb movies. She's barely in that movie, and we're not really going to count that as a movie for her or Jason Statham. It's that bad. That aside, her last action movies include Sin City 2 and Joe Carnahan's Stretch, which is a movie I love, but I know a lot of people missed. So if you have not seen Jessica Alba whipping anybody's ass in over a decade, now's your chance. And this looks like a solid Netflix action movie. The reason I say Netflix action movie is because, you know, it's got some dumb stuff in it, like someone starts a chainsaw in a hardware store, Kohl's, you know. Not a lot of thought put into details like that, but still, looks like it's got some bombastic action, and it looks like she in particular has some pretty solid moves in this movie. Looks like she was maybe working hard at some of the fight choreography, so it's going to be worth watching, you know, just for that. And then before I show you everything leaving in the month of June, they're also bringing back that 90s show for what they're calling Part 2. Now this is the That 70s Show cast, or at least parts of it, kind of reuniting for something that takes place in the 90s. If you missed it, you can check out Part 1. It's still on Netflix. But if you loved it or used to love That 70s Show, this is going to be another one of the best things coming to the platform this month, most likely. Now, here's everything leaving Netflix in the month of June. If you're new to the channel, welcome, but the date listed is the date it is gone, so you need to watch it prior to the date that I'm showing you. I've put some titles in bold. These are going to be titles I've strongly recommended in some recent videos. Just pause the screen if you need more time, but thanks again to Beam for sponsoring this video. Don't forget to check out their link in the description if you do want to try to get some better sleep, but I will keep making these videos as long as y'all keep watching them. Thanks for checking out this Netflix episode, and you will see me on the next one.